Alright, what's up YouTube? I just wanted to do another quick voiceover video for a league that we had off stream. Just go ahead and throw up some more gameplay of the Texas style Jund Shadow list. Again, if you haven't seen us stream this one live, it's just taking the Jund Shadow archetype and making it a little bit more resilient to hate, a little bigger, a little grindier. Get access to like Spyro, Liliana the Veil, Ren and Six, Croxa, stuff like that, while keeping a lot of the explosiveness of Shadow, Goy, Thoughtseize, Battle Rage. So this is the initial list. We'll just go ahead and jump into the replays and commentary of some of the matches. Again, this one's going to be a little bit quicker. So if there's any questions about any specific lines or anything that occurred, feel free to ask in the comments below, and I'll be happy to go over everything. So round one, start here, lose the die roll. Obviously never want to lose the die roll. Have a hand with a couple Ragavans, Blood Crypt, Bauble, Thoughtseize, Ren and Six. So pretty solid hand. Like if we're up against something unfair, we get to start off with Ragavan swinging in. If our opponent plays something like a Ragavan, we have Bolt. If they play like, I don't know, Tron Land, maybe we want a Thoughtseize instead of Ragavan, but we get a bunch of options. Opponent does end up playing their own Ragavan, so pretty easy to just go for the Bolt on their Ragavan. Like they might be able to dash in a second one on their turn, but it's looking like it's a Murktide matchup, so we're just hoping to like start knocking out creatures pretty early. They do have the dashed Ragavan, and they hit Thoughtseize to take our Thoughtseize. So now it's looking a little rough. Like we don't have a way to interact with Murktide. If we find a second land, we can get out like Ren and Six, which this is a little bit awkward. We find second land, but it's the Blood Crypt. So thought process here: I could dash the Ragavan and hit them, but I can't hit any way to like deal with their Ragavan. So I would be dashing and hoping to hit like an Opt or something just to get another redraw. Likelihood of that's pretty low. So I think what I want to do here is just hard cast out a single Ragavan and pass. So maybe they think I've got a removal spell for their Ragavan if they go to dash theirs. And I might be able to like buy myself a turn here. Them going for iteration is great, ironically, because it means either they have to kill my Ragavan and not cast anything else, or play their own Ragavan back out, in which case, like, if I top deck a land, Ren ping the Ragavan, it's going to be a huge, huge tempo swing. So, we do end up drawing the land, which means we get to Ren and Six, down ping on this Ragavan, and then just, like, attack with ours, get a treasure, probably play out a Tarmogoyf post-combat. So not a super convoluted turn, but it does give us like a really big swing in our favor. So now we're going to have the Tarmogoyf down just as like a really strong secondary threat. Really more of like primary threat now, like Tarmogoyf's outsizing Ragavan. So we see the Archmage's Charm our Ragavan. So we're just going to go ahead and ping it down. Get to double up on our spells here. Since we hit this fourth land, we get to kind of do it all. Like ping their Ragavan, play our Croxa, dash our own Ragavan. And if they answer that, that's fine. But they don't. So them going down to 3 here means that, like, next turn, if they do play out a Murktide, I can dash again, swing. If they let the 2 from Ragavan go through, I can ping with Ren and Six and they're dead. But hitting the Bolt means we can just, like, go for that and try to end the game right now, which thankfully we do. So that's game 1 against Blue-Red Murktide. Sideboarding in the matchup. We're just taking out things like Ragavan, especially on the draw. It's a little bit better on the play, but really bad on the draw. Ren and 6, not so good on the draw. Things that like don't get under counterspell, especially when they're tempo-oriented cards like Ren and 6. Then we've got an Inquisition coming out because it doesn't hit Murktide Regent. A Battle Rage coming out because of things like not only Unholy Heat, but like Brazen Borrower, stuff like that. Archmage's Charm to steal a shadow. And then we're boarding in Terminates, Soul Guide Lanterns, like anything that keeps our opponent from getting a Murktide Regent down. And we boarded in the second Engineered Explosives. There's times that you want to play it out proactively to get through like Blood Moon. If your opponent's got like a Channeler heavy draw or something, it's really nice. So this hand, 1 land again. We don't have a Ragavan, but we do have answers for all their 1-drops. And then if we just like see any lands, we're either able to cast Tarmogoyf for Ren and 6, especially if it's a fetch land. We can cast Ren, get our 3rd land drop. If it's not a fetch, then we can just hit any lands to start getting towards Spyro. So it's a little weaker on the keep side, but I think it's fine. Obviously, if we miss the land drops for an extensive amount of time, it gets significantly worse, as we can see. But we've got these green spells we can kind of ditch. We're just hoping to dodge a Blood Moon, which does not happen. But even Blood Moon's not the end of the world here. Like, we've got good red removal. They don't have a second blue for Murktide right now. If we find any 2 more lands, we can start casting Seasoned Pyromancers. But they do have this Hearse here, which we don't have a lot of great answers for. But drawing into the basic swamp takes this hand from like a 2 out of 10 to like a 7 out of 10. Because now any land at all allows us to cast Seasoned Pyromancer. We can't cast Ren and 6 under the Blood Moon, but it's a free discard to Seasoned Pyromancer. Alright. Important point to make that last turn. I drew the 3rd land. I could cast the Seasoned Pyromancer if I wanted to. The problem is I'm discarding either a Terminate, another Seasoned Pyromancer, or a Lightning Bolt. And all 3 of those cards are fantastic in the matchup, and I do not want to lose any of them. So I would rather wait until I can discard a second card with Ren and 6 that's not impacting the game and go that route. But opponent finding second blue source here is rough. And then kind of the same reason as like Lightning Bolt, Terminate. I don't want to discard Soul Guide Lantern because now that they found the second blue, Murktide's opened up. So I'm just trying to make sure that like I don't lose to a Murktide. And now we're getting to a point where like Liliana and Ren and 6 are both easy pitches to Spyro. I can't cast either of them through a Blood Moon. But I don't want to play this Spyro into straight counterspell mana. So I would rather like buy myself a little time. I'll discard the hand size. I just want to make sure that if they cast like a Murktide Regent, a Ledger Shredder, something here, that I can fight over it on their instep and then untap and resolve a Spyro. Like, I've got removal for days. I'm not worried about creatures. Here, they've got Counterspell mana up. They just countered the Soul Guide Lantern. So, I'm trying to debate between, like, taking this 6 and terminating into turn, or trying to terminate inside of combat, or what. I end up deciding, like, I'm just going to go ahead and terminate inside of combat. Like, there's no chance that the terminate resolves, but I might as well, like, get the counterspell out of hand. And then it resolves, which means I'm 100% windmill slamming a Seasoned Pyromancer here. Because if they just let me terminate their unlicensed Hers, I'm assuming that their hand is like Archmage's Charms or Lightning Bolts, Unholy Heat, stuff like that. Because there's no way that you let that terminate resolve if you don't need that threat there. Like, they probably have a Murktide or something. But either way, I get to ditch the extra land and the Liliana. I could have kept the other land in hand just to be able to have another ditch to Spyro, but I wanted to be able to bolt this if I wanted to. Get the Thoughtseize, and bolting my face there means this is like guaranteed Snapcaster following it up. Because there's no reason to just like fire off a bolt unless you have Snap available. But as we saw, they had a Murktide and an Archmage's Charm, so we kind of called their hand exactly like Heat, Lightning Bolt, Archmage's Charm that they couldn't cast, and Murktide. So we'll get rid of the Snapcaster here. And all we're doing is kind of hoping that our opponent doesn't draw third basic island. Like, if they don't draw the island, I feel like we're in pretty good shape. We end up drawing fifth land. I could go for Spyro, but again, I'd have to discard something between Bolt and Terminate. I really don't want to do that. So instead, I can just play this out and plan on flashing back Spyro tokens. Which I think my opponent forgot about with this dash. So they go for the dash. I just get like the free flashback. They can't Archmage's Charm. If they have a removal spell, then they still have to use it. Ragavan still gets blocked. And again, like, I am really, really, really valuing ditching 2 dead cards and keeping as many live spells as I can with this Spyro. So, like, last turn, I could have cast it out, ditched Bolt and Stomping Ground, but I do not want to ditch my extra removal spells here. Like, I think that's going to lead to me losing the game, is if they just are able to stick something I can't deal with. But this Murktide means I know their last card in hand is Archmage's Charm. So, get a free Terminate on it. And now Lightning Bolt can kill a second Murktide. I'm kind of just hoping to draw something dead so I can ditch 2 cards to Spyro, which I will consider Mishra's Bauble a pretty dead card here. It's like a card that could be a live draw, but if I play out Mishra's Bauble, there's a chance they draw a third blue source, and I can't get down Spyro under Archmage's Charm. So I'm just going to trade in this Bauble for another token here. As soon as the replace picks up. So yeah. Get rid of Bauble, get rid of the Stomping Ground, or the straight mountain. Could have Croaksed there, but like Croaksing here versus Croaksing next turn doesn't make a huge difference. So I decided to play out the Soul Guide Lantern, and then I realized that like my opponent has enough mana to just cast a Murktide, so Soul Guiding doesn't actually change anything. So since that's the case, I'm just going to use the Soul Guide as like a redraw on their end step. If Soul Guide could have cut off Murktide, I would have sacked it to nuke their yard, but Counterspell is fine, because that means I get to dash in with Ragavan, which will give me my second black source if I want to escape Croaxa next turn. But instead, I see a Ledger Shredder off the top of their library, and definitely just going to play that, because, hey, more guys on board, the better. So they find a Ledger Shredder of their own. Still know that their last card is Archmage's Charm. Sequencing here, we want to make sure that we lightning bolt the Ledger Shredder first instead of like Thoughtseize the Charm or Dash the Ragavan first, just so they don't get the Connive trigger off that. But if I do something like Lightning Bolt and then Dash Ragavan, I get the Connive trigger to get rid of this Thoughtseize, or I can just cast the Thoughtseize. Either way, opponent scoops up here. They know I've got Ragavan as my last card, so I can take their Archmage's Charm, dash the Ragavan again. If I don't hit anything live, I've got Croak's Escape next turn, and that's like a big ask for them to come back from. So that was round 1 of the league. Round 2, we win a die roll. Keep a hand with some lands, a Lightning Bolt, a couple Tarmogoyfs. So if our opponent's playing something fair and they play out a 1-drop creature, we can Lightning Bolt it, untap, play a 3/4 Tarmogoyf, and we've got some pressure going. If they're playing something unfair, like if they go Tron land, star, pass, then I'm probably just bolting them to go ahead and try to grow the Tarmogoyf a little bit. Just lets me use all of my mana, get a little bit better of a clock going. So our Boreal Grazer means Amulet Titan. And here I'm probably better off just like Lightning Bolting the Grazer. So I can go ahead and again be a little mana efficient. Getting a Stomping Ground there in case I draw into Seasoned Pyromancer. I've got my double red. I've already got double black with the Swamp and the Peatland. So we're just putting on a clock, seeing what we can do. Opponent's got their Saga. They've got Amulet. They've got plenty of mana. So not looking like a great spot for us to be in. They can haste up a Titan here, which we're probably just letting through. I don't really want to chump with the Tarmogoyf just to still have to take damage. Like, they've gotten their land triggers, so the worst part about this Titan's like already occurred regardless. And then if they had missed a part here, like if they didn't have the Valakut in hand, I wouldn't have scooped so soon. I'd make them play it out. Because we could represent like a fatal push here for the Dryad. But because they have the Valakut in hand and they're already getting triggers, like I'm not going to go through the time of letting them search out Titan targets. And alright, skipped over the mulligan decision. Let me start that back. So, opening hand, no lands, not keeping that. Second hand, kind of like the first, I've got Bolt into Tarmogoyf with a Spyro. It's not great, but it's live. I can just like throw back I think I threw back the Blood Crypt here. Might have thrown back the Peatland, one of the 2 lands. The non-fetch land, so I can keep the Scry with Mishra's Bauble. Let's see what I throw back. Yeah, throw back Blood Crypt. So now I've got access to the Scry with my Bauble. I see a Ragavan on top. I don't want to draw a Ragavan on turn 2 because it's just going to be worse than playing out a Tarmogoyf. Opponent playing tapped Garenbrig on 2 is great. This means no Amulet on 1, so no 3-drop on 2. Just go for the Bolt face. I could have tried to save it for like an Azusa or something. But I really want to like Spyro on turn 3 if I can. And if I'm Spyroing on 3, that means that I'm not casting or I'm not casting Bolt there, and I'd just be like sitting there with this Bolt in the hand. The Bolt will get discarded to the Spyro more than likely. Inquisition sees EE, Dryad, and a whole bunch of lands. So we're just going to take the EE. We could take the Dryad to grow the Goyf, but I don't want them being able to kill my Goyf and just like stifle my clock. Because right now I've got Delirium available for Unholy Heat, so I can kill the Dryad. And they might get an extra land drop, but if they don't find anything relevant with that land drop, then I don't really care about it. And then their hand's like all bounce land, so they just choose not to cast their extra land. Or not to play their extra land. And decide to just play out Turok as a 2-1 because the 6-7 Goyf plus the Turok means they're dead next turn if they don't draw anything. Which they draw Azusa. So now it's, alright, I need to find a removal spell. Like, I'm going to attack into this regardless, but removal spell would have been lethal right there. I could have cracked Peatland to try to find a Lightning Bolt or a Holy Heat, but if I did, I wouldn't be able to play out the Tarmogoyf, and I would rather just have the second Tarmogoyf than, like, a shot at the Unholy Heat. I guess I should have talked about sideboarding for this matchup. Trim on bolts because they don't kill anything except exactly Azusa and Arboreal Grazer, but I don't care about Arboreal Grazer. Trim Ragavans, a couple of them, especially on the draw because of Arboreal Grazer, and then like Urza Saga tokens. Trim some Ragavan or Renin 6s on the draw. They're worse on the draw than they are on the play. They're not great in the matchup overall, but the basic mountain is just because, like, I do not want to flood. I'll trim the second basic a lot of the times against, like, Tron as well. And bringing in the 3 copies of Terminate, because they answer Titan, answer Dryad Arbor. Or not Dryad Arbor. Dryad of the Elysian Grove. Bring in the second copy of Turok, because it's a good grindy threat that gets them top-decking late game. And then I bring in the second copy of EE because of Urza's Saga, so they're more likely to have constructs as well as be more consistent at finding like multiple amulets. And the last board ends with like the Alpine Moons. You can name bounce lands to make them only produce 1 mana, especially like if they bounce another land and then you Alpine Moon that land and they just bounced another and this one only makes 1. We've killed people because they, like, Summoner's Pact had a bounce land and like 2 other lands. We named the bounce land, they couldn't make 4 mana to pay for Pact, so a little flexibility there. But you can also just name like Urza Saga and stuff like that. I'm dying over here. Game 3, hand's fine. We've got like turn 1 Ragavan. If we really need to, we can terminate an Arboreal Grazer or like attack him with Ragavan, little block on Holy Heat to get that out of the way. We really don't want to see an Arboreal Grazer, but that's even worse for us. So we're just hoping to not see a really big turn here, which them playing Garen Brig and then second Amulet means that I don't think their hand is going to be that terrifying. They could have Titan next turn very easily. Like any bounce land gets them Titan. But if they had like Bounce Land Azusa or something, or Bounce Land Dryad, they could just Titan right now. And they didn't. So I'm assuming they're like missing something relevant. I'm just kind of hoping it's the Titan portion. And it is. It is the everything portion. They've got double Amulet with a whole bunch of bounce lands. I did have to tank here for a second. I was thinking, do I want to play out the shadow and try to get the clock going, or do I want to play out the, or hold up the terminate? And I decided just to play out the shadow here. Like, if they find Titan, I'm in a lot of trouble, but if they don't find Titan, then I get to untap and, like, hit with Ragavan again, play Liliana, hold up terminate. And they make a whole bunch of mana, so I kind of assume I'm, like, pretty dead here. But then they play Dryad, and it's like, cool, I don't care about Dryad. So I get to just Lily Edict here, swing in, and now I can just, like, start holding up terminate from now until the end of time. So they would have ripped back-to-back Dryads there. And then every time my opponent plays one of these bounce lands, I'm just, like, terrified, because if they're playing out the bounce land, they're getting 4 mana now. If they play it out and bounce something else, they're just getting 2 mana next turn. So, like, 9 times out of 10, it's better to hold the bounce lands in hand. Especially in a situation like this, where they haven't even put out 2 bounce lands that allow them to cast something off Garenbrig. But I'm not the Titan expert. So we can get in for a chunk here. And now we're just hoping that this terminate's going to be enough to get us there. EE on 1's a little annoying, because that means now they can kill my Shadow and my Ragavan. I do have another Bolt in the deck. And then EE also takes out their Amulets. So I decided to get a little cheeky here and, like, just attack with a Ragavan. So I'm thinking, like, maybe they let it through for some reason since it doesn't kill and I just get to Ren Ping, but opponent unfortunately sees the line. So we're just going to start going with this this Peatland plan. And what I should have done there is I had the Terminate and the Unholy Heat. I should have just started Ren Pinging my opponent last turn, because I'd be able to kill the 2 Saga tokens really easily between, like, Unholy Heat, Terminate, Liliana Edict. So, like, they would have been down to 1 this turn, and I would have just had lethal next turn with the Ren. But all I was thinking was, like, oh, I've got double Terminate, Unholy Heat. I'm drawing 2 every turn. Like, what do I care if they make some Saga tokens? Like, I would have just had them dead after this turn. So I can say pretty assuredly I should have been more aggressive about Ren Pinging. And this is when I finally start doing it. But they would have been dead here instead of at 2. Which, with double Terminate and Liliana, there's not really a lot they can do from 2. Or with their 2 draws. But having no outs is better than having, like, half an out. So they go to haste up a Titan. We go to terminate a Titan. Put them down to 1, play out Shadow, and we've got Terminate, and they scoop it up. So, moral of the story, don't try to be fancy. If you've got a Ren and 6 that can just, like, kill your opponent in a couple turns, just kill them in a couple turns. So, win another die roll, really nice. Great hand. I've got Inquisition into Tarmogoyf into Kroxa. We can escape Kroxa on turn 4 if we find one more card type, or if they, or not card type, one more card to put in the yard, or if they kill our Tarmogoyf, we've got escape Kroxa. if it's like burn or something, maybe you want a Croaks on turn 2. We see Living End. Between Force of Negation and Living End itself, since they have the Grief, I'm going to take the Living End. Or, yeah, I'm going to take the Living End so that they can't ditch it to Grief and get rid of our Tarmogoyf. Because we need to have pressure. So they cycle a Striped Riverwinder. We play out our Tarmogoyf. And let's dash our Ragioli. Now we can play out our Croaksa. There's Curator. There's Grief. So we're kind of assuming if they're like ditching the Grief here, they just have the Cascade spell, which they do. But they are at 14. So like the getting back this Croaksa is a very relevant clock. Like it's something they do have to respect for a couple turns here, especially if they're ditching land. It's like now this Croaksa represents 9 damage next turn. I do not know why they didn't attack with the Grief too. I don't know if they wanted to keep back 3 blockers or if they forgot that Grief has Menace. But if they had attacked with both and put me down to 6, I would have just been dead to no information next turn. And then we are attacking with the Croaksa first because we see Subtlety and Striped Riverwinder. Which means if I cast the Tarmogoyf first, they can Subtlety exiling the Riverwinder. But I don't want them to do that, so... They go for this huge block, so we'll just take out the most dudes that we can. Play out our 2 guys. And then them attacking with the Riverwinder kind of signifies like second Living End pretty easily. Which we don't really have any good outs here. So that's game 1, unfortunately. Game 2, sideboarding. We're boarding out some spot removal like these lightning bolts. Renin 6 is pretty bad here. Liliana is too slow. We're bringing in like the 3 Soul Guide Lanterns. What else are we bringing in this list? The Soul Guides. And is that it? 3 Soul Guides for 2 Lightning Bolts and Liliana. No, we've got the 2 Rens. Oh, 2 Turoks. In some of the other lists, bringing in the Turok is kind of like a meme. Like the counterspell heavy list, where every time they cycle something, it's going to grow the Turok. In this list, it's a little more relevant just because we don't have anything else to bring in. We're not bringing in like Fluster Storms or Spell Pierces or something like that. So we're just kind of going with highest possible upside for anything we've got. This hand's great. We've got Ragavan, we've got Soul Guide Lanterns. If we find a second land, we can like Goyf plus Soul Guide next turn. Speak of the Devil on the second land. So I really don't know why they did that like in the middle of my attack there. Not only does it let me get the Soul Guide Lantern down and exile something relevant, they didn't have any knowledge of what was on top. I didn't have any knowledge, so But I get a force negation out of hand, which is huge W for the home team. Means it's more likely that this second Soul Guide Lantern is going to resolve here. Then I assume this is them digging for another copy of Force Negation. Then casting out a shadow just to put it in the yard. So if they do have a living in this turn, I can respond with like bolt myself and get the shadow back. But as we can see, they did not have living in this turn. So there's already an instant in the yard with Force Negation, so casting the bolt doesn't do anything. Decide to cast the Violent Outburst because I still have this plan of like bolt myself, get back shadow if I want, but Violent Outburst can cascade me into like a hand disruption spell, which Croak says kind of. And then they ditch a Violent Outburst, so pretty easy call. They probably have another cascade spell in hand, which they do. Make them put the living end on the stack. And Soul Guide their stuff away. They give us back a lovely little shadow. As well as a Croaksa trigger, but more importantly a shadow. I could have gone to my turn and like played a shadow off the peat land, swung in with this shadow, and if they didn't block, I could bolt them. But I think it's like a guaranteed block, and I wanted to give myself a chance to just like draw a fetch land. But I needed to be mana efficient so I could get back this Croaksa this turn without casting Lightning Bolt. And now if they living end again, they get back a little bit, but we get back some stuff too. And that's all three living ends done, so hopefully don't have to worry about any more. I just have to beat what's on board right now, which is very manageable. So I had a moment here where I was thinking, okay, I could attack all out and they're dead, but for some reason I kept thinking they could kill me on the crackback if they had a subtlety. Like they could flash in subtlety, block shadow, block chump something with shardless, and then subtlety block. And for whatever reason, I was thinking the subtlety would keep living, but the subtlety would have to block one of these three. So they would have the Waker alive, and that's it. And they would die to whatever my fourth attacker was. Or they wouldn't die to the Ragavan. I would just get the Ragavan trigger. But I kept thinking that the subtlety would live, which is why I don't attack with the Ragavan here. But opponent scooped, so I'm assuming they just didn't have the subtlety. And then game 3. Don't believe there's any real changes on the draw. Sometimes I might consider like keeping a terminate in or something to give you an out in case they rely on like hard casting Curator of Mysteries or something. So opponent leads with a ley line, but not the ley line I was expecting. Usually Sanctity is the culprit of choice, but Ley Line of the Void means that we can't do our shenanigans of like playing out a creature into our graveyard and getting it back. Stops Croaksa, so we got to be a little careful of that. But at the same time, we just have a decent hand of like turn 1 Thoughtseize, turn 2 Shadow Soul Guide or something. We could turn 2 cast Turok. See a hand with just second land, Shardless, Subtlety, Curator, Foundation Breakers. That's fine. I'd much rather see Foundation Breaker than Force of Negation. I messed up my sequencing here. I should have led on Soul Guide first, so if they had Force of Negation, I could play the second Soul Guide. But I just kept thinking, like, I know the Shadow is going to resolve, and the likelihood of them finding a Force of Negation in their 2 draws is pretty low. But it would have been correct to cast the Soul Guide first. So, they evoke Foundation Breaker. I make sure they stack their triggers correctly, because they stack them the other way, then the Foundation Breaker goes to the graveyard, and then the Destroy ability resolves. So you can respond to the Destroy ability and exile the Foundation Breaker. Thoughtseize is great for growing our shadows. And I'm pretty sure I end up taking the Waker here, because it sees more cards when it discards. Oh. Did I take the... What did I take? I guess I took the Striped River Winder because it cycles right now, where the Waker, they would have to go to their turn and spend their whole turn cycling. So, that is fair. Then decide to go with that cheeky line of play out Turok, because if they spend their entire turn cycling Waker, it's just going to grow Turok. See a Living End on top, which is right where you want to see that card. So they find another River Winder, cycle it, grows Turok. So we know that they drew the Living End. Decided not to play the Tarmogoyf, because if my opponent has a Cascade into a Living End on this turn and I have to sack both of these guys, I want my backup threat in hand. And just as we assumed, they've got the Cascade spell, but we do get a Tarmogoyf. Dash Ragavan, I'm pretty sure they're blocking, but like, if Ragavan's not dashing into this and taking the trade, what's it doing? And it adds, like, artifact and creature to the yard for Tarmogoyf. So, here we're just on hope our opponent doesn't find anything relevant. Petty Theft is a little bit of a bummer, but at least they didn't find an untapped land there, so they can't Solitude, or can't, Subtlety our Tarmogoyf on the way back down without exiling a card. And honestly, that's kind of a win for us. So, opponent does end up doing just such a thing. Exiles a Force of Negation, which we're drawing into an Unholy Heat so we can kill this Brazen Borrower. Then they put the Tarmogoyf on top, so we draw the Tarmogoyf, draw the Unholy Heat next turn. So, draw the Unholy Heat, decide I'm gonna heat on their upkeep, so if they've got a Force of Negation, they have to spend all their mana. They do not. We're cracking in with Goyf. Decide there's no difference between 6 and 4. Subtlety's a 3/3. Brazen Borrower's a 3/1. So either one they could have, they still aren't killing us here. So Misty Living In means Subtlety is on chump block duty. Unless they just find another dude. And we just find a Croxa for lethal. We know their last card's Misty Rainforest. So that is match number 3 in the bag. Yeah. So on to replay match number 4. Lose the die roll. Hand's really good though. We've got turn 1 Ragavan or Bolt. Turn 2 whatever the other one is. Turn 3 Lily. So Hammer time. Could play out a Ragavan there, but I don't want my opponent to just go like Plains, Sigarda's Aid, cast a hammer, use these, like cast another hammer, and just be dead. So I'm kind of assuming they've just got like a Stoneforge Mystic or something in hand. So I'm just going to bolt before they can do anything that involves strapping up a hammer. Since they just passed the turn, it looks like they're going to make a Saga Construct. So I'll just bluff another piece of removal here. Got like really nothing going on for this. So I'm just kind of hoping to high roll, draw a shadow, have Battle Rage. And ironically, if our opponent doesn't have a Pure Steel Paladin or a Sigarda's Aid here, like, their hand's honestly not that bad. But then we see that they've got main deck Sanctifier on Vec. And there's just like no way I'm beating this plus main deck Sanctifier. So I decided to go ahead and scoop it up. So sideboarding against Hammer Time. Ragavan's really bad between like Memnite, Esper Sentinel, Stoneforge Mystic, and then like Saga tokens and everything else. Like Ragavan just gets stonewalled. Spyros are pretty slow and clunky. Same thing with like Croxa. Ren is okay, but like the better draws out of their deck aren't going to have any like active down ticks for Ren. So if you're just ticking it up, it's pretty subpar. Thoughtseize is okay, but most of the stuff like they can play out immediately. And the cards I think you're losing to more often than not are like Urza Saga, that you can't really interact with that well. So I'm boarding in everything from like the 3 copies of Terminate, the 2 Ancient Grudges, the Alpine Moons, the Engineered Explosives, Kolaghan's Command. I'm boarding in Turox because they're just like 2 mana stand in front of half their deck with a hammer equipped to it. So whole bunch of stuff coming in. This hand I really did not want to keep, but I was afraid of just going to like unkeepable god-awful 6. So I ended up keeping it because it's just like turn 2 Goyf, turn 3 double Shadow. If I find any piece of removal in there, like I'm just putting hard pressure on my opponent. And when they keep this turn 1 Springleaf Drum hand, like I'm actually thinking, okay, I might actually have a chance with this hand. They kept something slow and value-based. Then they Rest in Peace, which was like so out of left field from what I was expecting. Like I saw main deck Sanctifier on Vec. So to see Hammer Time board in Rest in Peace just threw me for all sorts of a loop. So best draw there would have been 4th land, so I could just EE on 2, take out Rest in Peace and Pure Steel Paladin. But we did not see the land. So we're just going to take out the Pure Steel, start swinging in. I decided to just play the EE on 1 here because I think if I'm losing this game, it's going to be to like another Pure Steel plus a hammer, Sigarda's Aid plus hammer, whatever. And if I have to take out my shadows to keep from losing the game, I'm willing to make that that play. And then this is another controversial line. Somebody that was watching the game in the background made the suggestion that after I made the play, my play was like play Ren and 6, pay the 1, ping the Esper Sentinel. And they made the comment that I should have pinged myself to play around Blacksmith skill. And I 1000% agree after seeing how this played out, because I do end up going for the Sentinel and they have the Blacksmith skill, which means I can't attack in with the shadows or anything. If I had pinged myself and attacked with the shadows, they could still have the Blacksmith skill and trade a Sentinel for a shadow, but that's a lot better than my opponent getting to, like we'll see here, equip up the Ink Moth, attack in, and get to infect me and kill a shadow. Like I would just have a 3/3 shadow that could attack into more. So slight, say slight punt, big punt there. Here I honestly just didn't expect my opponent to trade with the shadow. But it means that I get to terminate this Pure Steel Paladin, and they can't just like freely re-equip this sword. They gotta actually pay for it. I think they pay one too many for the equip. Like I'm still in really, really bad shape. So ditch the swamp, or ditch the mountain here, just so I can like play the Croxa next turn. Get an extra discard off of it. But Sigarda's Aid plus Shadow Spear means that with the Sword of Fire and Ice, they're just swinging for 4 infect. So rough one there. The sideboard, rest in peace out of Hammertime, threw me for an absolute loop. Had no expectation of that card. Wasn't anywhere on my radar. Alright, so game 3, lose the die roll. Reasonable hand, turn 1 Thoughtseize or Ragavan, turn 2 Ren. Assuming we find second land. So it's another Amulet Titan matchup. Do find second land for Ren. Opponent's got a 3-drop. Alright. It's a lot of mana, but it's not Titan mana. But you know what it is? Karn the Great Creator mana. So opponent's got a turn 2 Karn. I don't know why they went and got Tormod's Crypt here. Like, I think they could have easily said, hey, I'm going to get, like Wormcoil Engine or anything. Like, you've got Amulet, you've got lands. The Azusa is more than likely dead, so I think you get something more impactful. Because if I kill the Azusa and attack Ragavan at Karn, you can't activate Karn again next turn, then Tormod's Crypt just, like, isn't doing anything for you over the long haul. So they trade with the Ragavan. I decided to play the Ren and 6 and ping the Karn, so if they want to get something else with the Karn, they have to sack it off, which means I can probably, like, Thoughtseize whatever they pick up. And we're just going to keep Karn at bay, get Summoner's Pack, get down our Goyf. So I'm not feeling, like, bad here. I think if I can dodge a Titan and keep this Karn from doing anything too scary, I should be okay. They end up sacking the Tormod's Crypt in response to the Ren activation, which I get, but isn't that that terrifying of a line either. Spyro can just ditch Liliana Croxa, and I even managed to find land to cast another Thoughtseize. So now I've got Escape Croxa on my radar pretty quickly. They do have this Karn that they can activate, but if they make a construct here, then they can't like get Ensnaring Bridge. But they end up just floating mana and do get Bridge, but at the same time they've got 4 cards in hand. So after Ren pings off the Karn, I'm able to just like attack in with the Spyro and tokens. Like, it's not great, but the last I saw their hand just had like multiple Cavern of Souls. They've got another bounce land in hand. So if they draw a couple more lands, like, I'm looking at 3 or so free attacks with all these elementals and Seasoned Pyromancer. And just like that Thoughtseize shows, that's basically what happened. Is our opponent's just drawing a whole bunch of lands. So we do have to math out a little bit here, because if I escape Croxa, yes, they take 3, but they also get closer to being able to get cards down under Ensnaring Bridge, and I don't want that to happen. So instead, I'm just going to like let them take the damage, and then next turn I'll escape Croxa, so I get in like another 4 free damage with the Spyro and the Elementals. And now I can like Ren Ping, escape Croxa, which I want to escape Croxa before I show them Lightning Bolt, so they might discard a land, which they do not. They discard another Karn the Great Creator, which they chose not to cast out. I don't know why they chose not to cast it out, but then I believe they just top deck a Titan here, which Titan is pretty frustrating. I guess they don't top deck the Titan. They top deck, or they had the Solaria West. They needed the blue mana, so they top deck the Simic Growth Chamber. Then they could transmute for the Pact. So Radiant Fountain gives them a little more land to work with. This attack means that I can make sure 2 damage gets through. Then I can Ren Ping, get back tokens with Spyro, attack next turn, 3 damage gets through, puts them down to 2, and they're dead to Bolt. And since they have to pay for Pact there, I'm hoping that there's not a lot they can do with limited mana. Like, they can't get another Titan, but they can get a Dryad here. But the Dryad's fine, because it still means that I'm getting back tokens, swinging for 4, they block 2, take 2, go to 3, and I've got Bolt. So they can't attack with Titan to go get more lands. All they can do is like use their extra land drop to bounce the Radiant Fountain. And the second Ren means that even if they had played a Radiant Fountain, I could add Bolt plus Ren Ping to kill. So that was game 1. Game 2, just like the previous match against Amulet Titan, boarding out Lightning Bolts. I thought about bringing in Ancient Grudge since I saw Karn, and if I had gone to a game 3, I would have. But I did board in like K Command that I don't always board in, and I boarded in the extra copy of Engineered Explosives, which I think I went over that one last time. Board out the Wrens, board out the Mountain. Same thing. The Alpine Moons. Terminates. Yeah. Kind of standard. But if I'd gone to a game 3, I more than likely would have boarded Ancient Grudge in. High upside hand of Thoughtseize into like double shadow if we find another fetch land. So I decide to roll with it. We've got 2 hand disruption spells. So if I miss for a turn on hand disruption, like I'm still doing something relevant. Could have led on Fetch Shock Thoughtseize. So if I drew a fetch land, I could go Fetch Shock Double Shadow on turn 2. The problem was I really wanted this Inquisition to get value. And so if I went Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, Shock on turn 2, I couldn't play out Shadows, and I would be Inquisitioning and not being able to get down a threat. So if I wanted to cast both of my hand disruption spells the first 2 turns, then and get value off of both of them, I wouldn't have been able to get down. How to describe it? If I went for the high upside, which would be Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, top deck a fetch land, Fetch Shock Double Shadow. That means that my Inquisition is dead if they've got a an amulet like they had. If they've got a what's it called? Dryad and a Zeus, something like that. Those are getting down under the Inquisition. And if I have to Thoughtseize take the amulet and they've got like a Titan, then I can't take that away. So I want to cast the Inquisition on turn 1. I could Fetch Shock and cast the Inquisition. Go to 17. I knew I drew the Shock land. So on turn 2, if I don't draw another fetch land and I want to cast Thoughtseize, I can't play out a threat. So instead of going for the turn 2 Thoughtseize, I don't care about the Summoner's Pact or the Karn this turn because they're not getting either of those down. So instead, I can go to my turn, Fetch Shock, play Tarmogoyf, and be able to Thoughtseize on 3 plus a threat if I find another land. But that means I'm guaranteed a threat, a relevant threat down on turn 2. My Inquisition gets value, and all I'm giving up is the high upside of Double Shadow on turn 2, which can only happen if I top deck exactly another fetch land. Otherwise, I'm getting less than optimal value out of my Inquisition. Alright, so unfortunately they find second Amulet. And I do find the fetch land. So everything possible that could have gone wrong in that sequence went wrong. I still believe the line I took was correct. But if you were playing for the absolute high upside, turn 1, Fetch Shock Thoughtseize, take Karn, hit the second fetch land, turn 2, Double Shadow, turn 3, Inquisition, Summoner's Pact, like would have been a lights out sequence, but that all depended on like this Summoner's Pact being a pact and not a Titan, top decking the second fetch land. Like, it's a whole lot of ifs to take into account. And then here, I could have gone for the double shadow play, but decided to Kroxa first because I know their last 2 cards are a Gruul Turf and a Summoner's Pact. So if I can get either one of those out of their hand, I'm happy. Because I know I get to follow up with that Karn with a Shadow. Opponent decides to fix all of their mana. So I decide I'm just escaping Karn, or escaping Kroxa, getting whatever the last thing is out of hand, which is a Selesnya Sanctuary. So next turn, they have to chump block if they don't hit anything relevant, which they don't. And opponent just scoops to the Kroxa. So that is it. Nice little 4-1 for the deck. Beat Amulet Titan twice. We beat Murktide. We lost to Rest in Peace out of Hammertime, which is, again, not a card like I'm ever going to have on my radar. It's not one I'm going to play around. I'm okay losing that one. The deck itself functioned very, very indicative of how the deck has normally functioned. We played it on stream the other day, and it did not look as good, but that was the first league I've had where a lot of things like mana issues really showed up. Some changes that you might want to consider if you're interested in possibly picking up the deck are the mana base is still not perfect. We've got like 3 green sources with Renin 6 and Tarmogoyf and Flashback Ancient Grudge is the only green cards in the deck. That being said, those like are very important ones, but I could see cutting the Peatland. But at the same time, the Peatland has been very, very good for me with Renin 6, so just give it a shot before you make too many changes. The Lilianas and Spyros have been really good, especially against decks like Murktide. Like our main deck configuration against Murktide is great. Out of the board, the K command has been pretty lackluster. The Ancient Grudges are okay, but like I won a trophy off of a 5th match against Hardened Scales because I had Ancient Grudge and it was really good. So I don't know, just give it a shot, see what you think. Maybe the deck works out for you. It's been working fairly well for me, so I don't have too many complaints. But hopefully you give it a shot. Either way, if you want to see the deck live, come check it out on our Twitch, twitch.tv/the_control freak, spelled just like the YouTube channel here. And maybe we'll catch you there. Otherwise, hope everybody has an awesome rest of their day. Till next time.